Welcome, fans, to another edition of the Great North Wrestling Podcast on thehannibaltv.com. My name is Jack Kilby, Executive Vice President of Great North Wrestling. And tonight I'm pleased to have on a man who has had an extensive career in the professional wrestling industry. He's known for his appearances in NWA, WCW, WWF, Florida independent scene, championship wrestling from Florida, amongst many others, and is a keen, how you would say, really elder statesman in terms of experience only in the sport. That would be the Cooker, Bob Cook. Bob, thank you so much for coming on the Great North Wrestling Podcast tonight, sir.
I appreciate you having me on, and I apologize to the millions and millions of fans that aren't watching for being late, but I can't figure this stuff out. I fired my guy. He left. I had to tape this stuff up. He's fired for good too, by the way. I should have used the good-looking blonde that didn't know what she was doing, but better job than that guy did.
Well, these things are sent to try us, but no problem at all. The technology is a blessing and a curse. But before we get into your career and some of your insights in terms of the business, wanted to ask your thoughts on the recent passing of a man I know who meant a lot to you, and you often drew comparisons in terms of your great punch, and that would be the legendary multi-Hall of Famer Terry Funk, whose shirt you're wearing there tonight.
It is one of the hardest things that I've dealt with. And it sounds silly, I haven't talked to Terry in a long time because he got, his health got worse over the years, and people would tell me different things. You didn't want to talk to him, and just, if you didn't really know who you were anymore, it'd be more depressing than just remembering the good times. But when I heard the news, I just cried like a baby. I liken it. There's been the Great Malenko affected me that way, Evel Knievel, and Terry Funk. They're three people that are never, ever going to completely get over their death in my life. I think about Terry Funk every day. I think about the Great Malenko every day. I think about Evel Knievel every day. I surround myself with their memories. They were three of the greatest people I've ever known. Terry Funk is the reason I wanted to be a wrestler. And I think, maybe not, never mind, they're not there. A pair of Terry Funk boots, I call them, that I wore in the ring for many years that he gave me at the Sportatorium in Tampa in 1986 that I treasure. They don't look like they did when he gave them to me, but I've wore them proudly against some of the greatest wrestlers of all time. I like to say I was far from the greatest wrestler, but those boots graced the ring with some of the greatest wrestlers. Attached to my feet. Thanks to the greatest wrestler, who is no longer with us, Terry Funk. In my opinion, Terry Funk is the greatest professional wrestler of all time. Why? Because he wasn't just a great wrestler. He was a great human being. And that makes such a difference. That you could be the best wrestler of all time, but if you're a jerk outside the ring and you treat people like this and that, and they're not right, that knocks you down a notch in my book. But Terry Funk was the opposite. Terry Funk treated everybody like they were his best friend. He would offer advice, give advice. You know what I mean? You could be a great wrestler, but if you're a jerk, you're not as great of a wrestler as someone like Terry Funk, who was anything but a jerk. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm still upset over this tripod.
Oh, that's okay. We'll roll with it. But yeah, definitely a huge loss to the industry as a whole. I wanted to ask you another general question before we get into your career, and that is, you're involved with the Cauliflower Alley Club organization, and when we talked early in August or mid-August, you were about to attend the convention there this year. Can you talk about your involvement in CAC and its special and important place in the history of the business, as well as the role that it plays with so many wrestlers that have graced rings that are retired at this time.
Yeah, I mean, the CAC is very important. A lot of people don't know exactly what it is. It's an organization that is a 100%, what do they call that, a nonprofit organization. It's been around for 57 years. The president is a great friend of mine. I like to drop names, Brian Blair. And I'm their social media coordinator, I think they call it. I don't know. I don't really know the real line, but it's a great organization. It helps wrestlers and people in the business, not necessarily wrestlers, but people in the business who fall on hard times, whether it's, they've lost something in a fire, they can't pay their bills because of health reasons or whatever it is. The CAC steps in and helps them as much as they possibly can. And the more members that we get is the thing people don't understand. It's not just for professional wrestlers. The help is for the people in the business, but anybody can join the club. And if you love wrestling, you claim to love wrestling, if you've got anything out of wrestling in a positive light as a kid, as an adult, and your way to pay back, whether you're a fan or a wrestler, especially wrestlers, I'm calling out every wrestler who might listen to this tonight or tomorrow or the next week, join the Cauliflower Alley Club, because someday you might need them. And I'm not ashamed to admit that they helped me. We had a huge hurricane come through our area and destroy it last year. CAC helped me, and I appreciate it. And they, you know what I mean? They helped me. So what am I going to say? So I'm not putting them over for that reason. I've been putting them over for years, but I'm saying they helped me, and they've helped a lot of legendary wrestlers, some that don't like to be mentioned, and we don't mention them, but others who have no problem being mentioned. They helped Paul Orndorff, they helped Kumala, and they helped a lot of the legends over the years that fall onto hard times. Without them, who knows what would have happened. So I always tell people, join the club. And if you're in a wrestling school, a trainer, a good trainer, I think, should teach their students just as much as it's important to get pro wrestling boots, something that seems to have fallen by the wayside, like a bunch of other traditions in this business. But they should tell them, join the Cauliflower Alley Club. Obviously, you can't make people do things, but if you instill in them the importance, maybe they'll be smart enough to go, hey, I should probably join. You obviously can't make them, but you can encourage them, and you can ask them nicely and slap them around, maybe rub their face to the mat a little bit more. They'll get the message. Because someday, whether it's next week or 30 years from now, when they can't get out of their chair because they've been taking a bunch of stupid bumps, Darby Allin, you might need the Cauliflower Alley Club. Sorry, I went on.
Yeah, I that's all good. I attended the reunion in 2019, and I think what you stated is on point. If you're a fan of the business, involved in any capacity at all, it's a really, really good thing to do, to join the CAC. They have that lifetime membership. Where could the fans that want to check that out get that membership information? I'm assuming on the Cauliflower Alley Club website, correct?
Right, caulifloweralleyclub.org. All the information is there. You can join annually, or you can join lifetime, like you said. You get a newsletter every 3 or 4 months. It tells you about upcoming events, different things. We always honor people who have passed away in each letter. Unfortunately, that list gets longer and longer. Here's the rules, folks. Enjoy your life. The longer you live, the more people you're going to lose along the way. And I don't say get over it, but be prepared for it. And it sucks. And that's what I was at the Cauliflower Alley Club a couple weeks ago, and I was asked and honored to induct Joe Malenko, or present Joe Malenko with his award. Joe asked me to do it. I love Joe Malenko. I love the Malenkos. You'll probably get into that. Mm-hmm. But that was a hard thing for me to do because I'm not a good public speaker. I'm not comfortable doing things like this, but I did it because Joe asked me. But that was so hard to stand up there in front of all those people. CM Punk was there. Cool guy. I'm going to tell you right now. Mickey James was there, JBL, Ron Simmons, a bunch of the legends, and I'm standing up there, Bob Cook, the nobody. I wrestled a lot of those guys, but I'm a nobody. But I was standing up there 2 days after I did that for Joe, Terry Funk's funeral, and that was on my mind. And that same day was the day that the great Malenko died 29 years earlier. That was on my mind. So I said what I wanted to say, but I didn't say all I wanted to say because I started to tear up. So I ended my speech like, "Oh, hey, Joe, here's your award," So I'm just, saying it was a tough thing for me to do, but I did it. Hopefully there's no video of it. I'm blown up. That's what happens when you get older.
Again, fans, check that website out and consider seriously grabbing a lifetime membership or at least an annual one. I know I have. Growing up, were you
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm
just
assuming
going to
you're
follow the Cauliflower Alley Clubs on Facebook, Instagram, X, or Twitter if you prefer. Personally, Twitter's been X rated for years, so X fits in. But anyways, follow there. to find out the latest information and when the next reunion is. So there you go.
Absolutely. Growing up, a lot of the fans are interested in the background of those that competed in the industry. Were you a fan of professional wrestling, and if so, what particular areas did you follow? And aside from obviously Terry Funk, did you have any particular influences?
I moved to Florida when I was a young kid, like 11 years old in 1975. And I always like to tell people this. I met a kid. His name's Dale Dibler. I always put Dale over because without Dale, I wouldn't be sitting here today. And there's a lot of people going, well, geez, I wish you never would have met Dale. I wouldn't have to look at him right now. But you're looking at me. But I give Dale the credit because we were playing basketball one day and he says, hey, I got to go home, man. Wrestling's coming on. Wrestling? Why do you want to watch that crap? I was just a dumb kid, And I went home with him and I fell in love with it instantly. Championship wrestling from Florida. Terry Funk was the world champion. He was going crazy. Gordon Soley was calling the action. And I, as an 11-year-old kid, thought, I've just discovered the greatest thing ever. And for all my life, I couldn't figure out why the rest of the world didn't get in on it and understand why it was so great. But I always liked roller derby too, which was similar to wrestling. But I never watched wrestling as a kid because everybody said, oh, it's all fake. But then I went home with that kid and I watched it and fell in love with it. And it was Terry Funk who got me hooked. I'm blown up again.
In terms of that
long story, but
no, very interesting. In terms of that seminal decision to pursue wrestling as a career, what sparked that in you? And do you remember, was it something that you made a conscious decision to do, or did you just kind of fall into it, so to speak?
No, I from the first time I saw it, I said, man, I want to do that someday. And I even, you go back and you look in your yearbooks in school. Before I moved to Florida, my biggest hero of all time, still to this day, was Evel Knievel, right? So you go back and you look at my yearbooks before I moved to Florida, everybody was like, to the next Evel Knievel. My teachers would sign. It was great having you and Evel in our class because I would always talk about Evel and bring books and, draw pictures of Evel and stuff. But then as I got in Florida and started going through school there, all the yearbooks became to the next world champion, good luck in wrestling, because all I talked about was wanting to be a wrestler. And I just got lucky how I got in it, but I always wanted to be one. Just like Shawn Michaels, when he was 12 years old, he wanted to be a wrestler. So did Bob Cook. But who's Bob Cook? Nobody. Who's Shawn Michaels? A freaking legend. But we both tried.
Well, that's very debatable about yourself. But when you underwent the training process under the Malenkos, could you describe what that was like at that time frame? Because a lot of the fans are they comment about how different it was as compared to today.
A lot of people will say how they were trained. They were beat up, they weren't exposed, or they weren't told the business was a work until their first match. Malenko smartened us up, at least the class I started in 1981. The first day, he told us this is a work. You're working together to create the illusion that you're in a wrestling match that's legitimate. It is an art form, and he never beat us up. He never stretched us. He showed us different moves as we learned throughout the process, things to protect yourself in case a fan came in the ring or someone got smart in the ring as a wrestler. You know how guys can be jerks. Never happened to me, by the way, but he showed you different things to protect yourself, hopefully, if that situation came up. But he exposed the business, if you want to call it that. Now, a lot of times I think maybe he did that because he realized that if you got 10 people that want to pay to come to your school each week and you beat them up, and next week you only got 2 that come because they don't want to get beat up again, that's a lot of money you're throwing away. So if you teach people from the beginning what it's about, and it wasn't easy, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, but him saying it was exposing it, it wasn't easy. The training was brutal. It was hard. I went home with bumps and bruises and sore because that's the business. But he didn't beat you up and prove to you that he could beat you up because he could. He was a tough guy, But that was my experience, thankfully.
When you broke in, you started in terms of championship wrestling from Florida, and you shared the ring with some greats such as Bad News Allen, Scott Hall, Ron Simmons, Kevin Sullivan, amongst others. What was that experience like to be in with those Hall of Famers and breaking in around that same time frame?
Well, I actually started at 81. I didn't wrestle for championship wrestling from Florida until 86. So I was doing it for a few years before I got lucky. And again, I got lucky to get in there. But it was great. I mean, Kevin Sullivan was, a lot of people will tell you different stories. Everybody has a different experience with people, but Kevin was always easy with me. He was always cool to me. He helped me a lot throughout the years. And he's still great when I see him, today. Ron Simmons, too. Ron Simmons, by the way, put me over in his speech at the Cali Fair Alley Club a couple weeks ago.
Wow.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you again, Ron, because I thanked him personally. But they were all cool. Bad News Allen was cool. He let me do a lot more than a lot of people he would let do for whatever reason. I got a lot of stuff in. And in wrestling, it's if you take your advantages when you can, if you're trained properly, the guy will sell it and he'll fight back, you fight back. It's all in what you do. But Bad News Allen, he gave me all kinds of stuff. I fought back, punched, kicked, punched, took him down. I knocked him down with punches. Ron Simmons, though, I started working with him when he first started. That's about the same time I started with Florida wrestling, even though I'd been working longer. But Ron, and he was always good, but he was so much better a couple years later when I started working with him in WCW. And he was just, it's like night and day. It's how good he got. He was great. One of the nicest guys you ever meet, too. Yeah, I hope this tripod don't break.
Oh, don't worry about it. I'll jump up a bit because that was one of the questions I wanted to ask you about WCW. You had a number of matches on television, it seemed, in 92 with both Steamboat and Ron, and of course worked him quite a bit before that. Did they specifically request you for those TV tapings because of how you were able to work with them and make it a compelling match?
I can't say. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't think they did. The guy who set most of those up was Jody Hamilton, which is why I never had to work with that idiot Big Van Vader. That's right, folks. Bob Cook called Vader an idiot. You know why? First, because he was. Second, because he's not here to beat me up. But Jody Hamilton always told me, I'll never make you work with that fat SOB. Bob, don't worry about it. He took care of me in that sense. But he made the matches, as far as I know. I don't know if anybody. I know when Sean Waltman, Sean Waltman, Xbox, great guy. I've known him since he was a kid. He used to go to shows with me before he got into business. He requested me when he had a tryout with WCW in 91 or 2. I don't remember the year. But he specifically requested me. He didn't get his job, but it wasn't because of the match. We had a really good match. Even made it in Japanese wrestling magazines. Pictures, I lost, but I let him win,
Absolutely. In terms of your tenure in going back to Florida again, what would you consider to be your highlight? Would that be that tag title win over Mike Graham and Steve Kern, or would it be something else?
You want to know what's silly? Probably the absolute highlight was wrestling the very first time on Championship Wrestling from Florida, which was a young guy named Sean Royal, who was a great wrestler. He didn't last as long as a lot of guys, but he was a great guy. And I blacked his eye even in the match. It was the first time ever on the show, and we did a spot where I don't remember what he did, but he came off the ropes and I caught him with a knee. But as I brought my knee up, I also tagged him in the eye with my elbow, and you can see him when he falls down. He grabs his eye for a second, then he sells his gut because that's where I hit him with the knee. And after the match, I was, oh man, I'm sorry about that. It's part of the business. He didn't, he was really cool with it. But the whole point of this story is, and I'm sorry it's dragging on that long, but the absolute highlight was going home that Saturday because they taped them on Wednesday mornings and it aired originally on Saturday. And hearing Gordon Soley call a match that Bob Cook was in, I got this young man, Bob Cook, first time on championship. I was like, whoa, that, I mean, if you want to be honest with you, the absolute highlight, that was it, because I was a big wrestling fan, and it was Gordon Soley's the man. And he was a great guy, too, by the way. His son, let's not get into that. But yeah, that was a highlight. But if you want to go to the second highlight, it was when Jerry Gray and I became the Muddy Yankees because of Mike Graham and Kevin Sullivan. They're the ones who came up with that gimmick. And I know it sounds silly, but they like baseball. What do you want from me? And they asked us to do it, and they gave us the mask, and then they let us beat Mike Graham and Steve Kern on TV, and we won the titles. After we won the titles, Jerry and I went in the closet, and we're like jumping up and down. Don't tell anybody I said that. Embarrassing.
In terms of your movement from there over to Jim Crockett Promotions, NWA. How did that occur? And also, do you have any memories of your TBS Studios debut match against Captain Redneck Dick Murdoch?
Yeah, what's funny is I they didn't pay much money when you did those TVs. And two friends of mine, Robbie Idle and Rick Ryder, were going to go do TV in Atlanta, and I didn't really want to go, but I just went, and just to get away because I wasn't doing nothing that weekend. And I brought my stuff because you're always taught to bring your stuff, but I didn't want to work, and I get because I knew they only paid like $50, which I realized that that's decent money for especially a lot of guys don't even make that now in the indies. But I got there and Kevin Sullivan goes, "You got your stuff?" And I said, "Yeah, but I didn't come to wrestle." He goes, "Well, I want you to work with Dick Murdoch." He said, "I'll go get my bag." Because I was like, I'd be ready to go, "Hey, how much do I owe you for that, Kevin?" This Murdoch. I loved Murdoch. He was great because he came to Florida, a few times before that. And he was just always, anytime Murdoch was around, it was like Terry Funk for me. I would hang around him as much as I could, whether it was in the dressing room and after the shows at the bars, because they were fun to be around. Murdoch was basically 10 times turned up more off the air than he was on the air.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A fan on social media wanted me to ask you what your thoughts were on the episode.
A fan? Is that a rib? Is that a rib? A fan? Come on, you ribbing me?
No,
you just need a person on social media, not actually a fan.
Oh, an absolute fan. Wanted to get your impressions of the Dark Side of the Ring episode on Eddie Graham and the whole Florida promotion.
Oh, I thought you'd want to do my impression of Terry Funk. God damn it, Cooker, get off my stage. Oh, what'd you just say? I'm sorry, I rambled.
Your impressions of that Dark Side of the Ring treatment on Eddie Graham and Championship Wrestling for Florida.
I didn't think it was that bad. I mean, I don't like Dark Side of the Ring because obviously it's Dark Side of the Ring. And when you see people stories, because I loved Mike Graham, he was so nice and easy to work with. He was a great guy. To me personally, if other people have experiences other than I did, that's your problem, not mine. It was sad to see when you see like his father committed suicide, his own son committed suicide, then Mike committed suicide, and it's depressing is what it is. But I hate those Dark Sides of the Ring. They try to ruin people. The people who make those shows, regardless of what they may say to get people to go on the show, they don't like wrestling or they wouldn't do that stuff. Look what they did to Flair with that whole airplane crap. Come on. Mm-hmm. And you can say, well, all you want, oh, Flair did that himself. Go away.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, definitely not the most uplifting series, although Tales from the Territories seems to have a more distinctly positive spin to it. One of the individuals that you work with on TV in '87 was the young Sting. What do you remember about him at that stage of his career? And can you believe that he is still doing what he's doing at age 60, whatever, in AEW? A couple of those bumps in the past few months, it's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, the crazy bumps, like where he hit himself with the table, and hey, he's doing what he loves. He's making good money, and it's hard to turn down that money. He's however old he is, 60, 4 or 5. Extra money in your bank account, no matter how much money you have, and he's doing what he enjoys. He doesn't have to do it like the old days. He's not on the road all the time. And he doesn't have to do those things for whatever reason he chooses to. I'm sure Tony Khan wouldn't go, "Oh, Sting, you have to jump off that balcony and land on the thing. You have to do it,
Mm-hmm.
But he loves it or he wouldn't do it, I would imagine. But he was always cool with me, always. All the times I worked with him, and I can't specifically remember the match you're talking about in 1987 other than it was easy and, quick and easy. But he was always cool to me. Anytime I worked with him, I'd sit in the dressing room with him and he'd put his makeup on while we'd talk about the match and I'd tell him what we're going to do. I wouldn't tell him what we're going to do, but I would go through what we're going to do. And most of the time he'd just say, "Oh, that's good. That's good." And if he didn't like something, we'd change it or whatever. But he was so easygoing. He even saved me from getting yelled at by Bill Watts one night. Him and I had a match and we did a couple of comedy spots. Every once in a while I like to do comedies. Like he got me outside the ring and I can run in the ring real fast and trip because I'm mad and I stay up the floor and whatever. We did a couple of comedy spots and Bill Watts hates that. And I remember sitting in the dressing room with Sting and we're talking about the spots and Sting goes, "Yeah, I like it." And Michael Hayes is sitting there and he goes, "Hey, I love that kind of stuff, but Bill Watts is going to hate it." And Sting goes, "We'll do it anyways." So we did it. And when we came back, Watts was like, "Oh, whose idea was that crap?" And Sting said it was my idea, not my idea. He took the blame and said it was his idea. And Watts says, well, okay, well, just don't do it again. You know? So he saved me from getting yelled at. But I liked Bill Watts. Don't get me wrong. Bill Watts is cool to me. He's actually the guy who started the whole Bob Cook has the best punch in wrestling stuff. That was all
Oh,
Bill
really?
Watts.
How was that?
I was wrestling Van Hammer one night at the center stage in Atlanta, and Watts was on commentary with either Jim Ross or Tony Schiavone. I don't remember. And after the match, I was up getting a soda, a Coke. I normally drink Mountain Dew, but they didn't have Coke. Oh, Mountain Dew. Anyways, I was upstairs getting a soda, and Pee Wee Anderson came up and said, Cook, Watts wants to see you. And I thought, oh, crap, what do I do now? You know, I thought I was going to get in trouble. And we're in the hallway, and everybody's in the hallway. And he goes, I want you guys to know that Bob Cook throws the best punch I've ever seen next to my own. He threw that in there, put himself over. That's fine. That's the wrestling business, right? But he said, Bob Cook throws one of the best punches I've ever seen. And from now on, all you guys are going to sell it, and the announcers are going to put it over. And then right after that, he took me in a room with his son, Eric, who was just starting out then, and had me teach Eric how to throw punches. So Eric talks about that when he does his interviews like that. He always puts me over, and Eric was always cool to me. Anybody who out there thinks less of Eric for whatever reason, he was in a tough spot. He handled it like a man. He never had an ego. He was easy to work with. He was easy to give advice to, and he would take it, and he was easy to, you know what I'm saying? Very easygoing guy.
Mm-hmm.
Love the guy. He even called me not long ago because I was going through my own little depression stuff, and he was just checking on me. So he's a great guy. So anybody who doesn't think Eric Watts deserved to be where he was, there you go, from Steve Austin and Bob Cook right there. You saw it. Sorry, you can blur it out.
Yeah, he was a guest this past summer on this podcast, and just a fascinating interview.
Did he put me over?
What do you think? I'd have to go back and check it out, but I'm sure it's in there somewhere. What do you think of the those that criticize that tenure of Watts in senior in WCW? Both, a lot of criticism about the off the top rope stuff and the language on some of the programs. For example, Foreign Object is an international object, and the removal of the mats, and et cetera, et cetera. What are your thoughts on his performance in that role overall?
Yeah, everybody has their own way of doing things, and everybody thinks their way is right. And if you don't like it, you can always leave or quit. Like I said, well, Bill was always cool to me. He'd sit in the dressing room and tell me stories and stuff. Just always cool to me. Yeah, he changed a few things. I wasn't a big fan of taking the mats away outside the ring because I always used to do a bump where a guy would punch me or something, and I'd get up real quick and fall through the second and bottom rope and act like I'm falling through the ring and try to grab it and then land flat on my back. I still did it with the concrete. Stupid. Don't do that, kids. But when they took the mats away, it made it even worse, but I still did it. But it wasn't like a big deal. I never thought about that stuff, and they always had rules like that years ago. You ever go back and look at some old wrestling magazines from the Amarillo territory? There's a sign hanging under the bottom turnbuckle that says, fine however much money for jumping off the top rope, so every territory had different rules, different, like WWF all those years had like, what's the 20 count outside the ring, and or NWA, you couldn't throw them over the top rope or you'd be disqualified. But in WWF, you could, But I never had a problem with Bill Watts. But wrestling fans are always going to complain. Imagine if they had the internet back when Bill Watts was around. Holy mackerel, white flag, throw in the flag. It'd be all over, I'm not a big fan of most wrestling fans. All they do is complain.
Well,
like Maul complained about all the people that got fired this week, and they didn't care two craps about them before they got fired. But now they're fired. Oh, no, I can't believe them. They're so evil. WWF's evil.
Yeah, fair enough. There's definitely, everyone has a platform now to express their opinions that they didn't before.
Yeah, could you imagine being Dolph Ziggler? Dolph Ziggler had a job for 20 years. He's a millionaire. He's been in movies. He's had video games. He's been in video games. He's had action figures. Oh, poor Dolph. I'm sure he's sitting back going, what a life I had. He's all right. And unless he's an idiot, and if he saved his money and did it right, he's set for life. How could you feel bad about that?
Yeah, that's
world champion at one time. Poor Dolph.
Yeah, that
Sign
was
me
one
up.
thing you pointed out on your page about 20-year run. That's not bad. It's just not really much to be upset about at this point. Anyway,
if fans aren't upset, they're not breathing.
True. I'll give you that too. In some circumstances, you did a lot of work in WCW in the famous center stage for TV. Can you describe your experience in that atmosphere that we hear about quite a bit?
It was cool just because of where it was. It was a dumpy place, kind of. It was an old place, like an old dreary hallway, and there's like 3 dressing rooms and on the side, and then I don't remember the whole layout now, and there was seats around like maybe a U or something, but then the stage was there. But it was okay. It wasn't a bad place. The food, though, we always talk about that. WCW had catering, and when you were doing center stage, you always ate before the show somewhere else or after the show, but you didn't really want to eat there. For whatever reason, the catering was bad. I don't know why.
Did you find there were a lot of non-wrestling fans there that had to be sort of programmed as to how to react? Because we heard, or have heard, that they could basically come in off the street, and there weren't exactly hardcores there.
I don't remember because I didn't pay attention to that, and I can't see very good at all with my glasses. Heck, I can't see very good with my glasses. I mean, you're blurry. But back then, you walk. I only saw the crowd when I went to the ring, and I didn't see them because I can't see without my glasses. So I don't really know who was reacting. I do know that there was a point where they hired models to be in the crowd, kind of decent looking girls, better looking than your average, maybe wrestling fan, the way that people would think of a wrestling fan. But they would scatter them around just to make it look like a more up class fan base or something. I don't know. Probably got paid more than we did, if I think back on it. Somebody's got to know. Dave Pinzer, do you know?
I've heard that too, that they were that models were hired and well compensated. In terms of your matches around this tenure with the Steiner brothers, they've been described, like working 2 sacks of concrete and being very stiff with those that they worked with in the ring. Was that your experience too?
No, not at all. They never hurt me, and I know a lot of people. And back in those days, you use the term jobber, and I'll go into that rant, but I always hated the term jobber. There were guys I thought should be called jobbers. You go back and watch the old TBS shows. There was guys that didn't even know how to hit the ropes back in those days, But if you knew how to work, most of the guys treated you, fairly well. But the Steiners were always cool to me. Now, Rick Steiner did knock me out with his clothesline once. I don't think he did it on purpose. And he gave me the first time I worked with him, he gave me a fat lip. Remember he used to do that thing talking to Alex?
Yes.
He talked to his hand.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yes.
And he was doing this, and I was in the corner. He was doing this, and he just jabbed me, and he gave me a fat lip. But they were always easy to me. I just saw Rick Steiner a few months ago. Talked to him for a little while. Yeah, they were always cool to me. But again, everybody has different experiences. I did see Scott Steiner. I mean, I saw Scott Steiner a couple months ago, if I didn't say that. But I did see Scott Steiner beat a guy up one night for messing up the what were they called that? The Frankensteiner. And the guy came in the dressing room and grabbed his bag. And we never saw him again. So don't mess up with the Steiners.
Beat him up in the ring, you mean?
In the ring. Yeah. He screwed it up, and then he beat him up in the ring, and the guy came back, took his bag, and left. I think it was in Gainesville, Georgia. But Scott always used to make me take the Frankensteiner because he said, I never screw it up, and I don't mind taking it. I remember one time, you think about what people doing. People don't know what you're saying. They, if they don't, people don't really know what's going on. Rick Steiner used to do a thing where he'd put you on his shoulders and he'd step up on the step up to the second rope in the corner, and then he'd fall backwards with you. And he's got me on his shoulder, stepping up. He's stepping up, and we're up there, and you're looking out at the crowd, and Rick's going, "Are you ready, baby?" And I'm like, "Don't hurt me, don't hurt me." He goes, "Here we go." Woo! And it was easy. That's a stupid story, but but people don't know what you're saying. I'm sitting there going, "Don't hurt me, don't hurt me." And he's like, "Here we go, baby."
Yeah, it definitely.
One thing about Rick, he'd whip you in the ropes. Strong. He'd whip you in the ropes. Pardon? I didn't hear that.
Well, yeah, definitely well known for their incredible strength, both of them.
Oh yeah, you didn't have to help them too much when they did their moves. But again, they never hurt me. Rick would whip you in the ropes and just say, "Guess what?" Which usually meant he was either going to give you a clothesline or a power slam. So you just had to kind of be ready. But again, they never hurt me. Same with the Road Warriors. People think the Road Warriors killed people, and they did, but they never killed me. I got lucky.
Yeah,
I guess.
that's something that comes to mind that I wanted to ask you in terms of the what did you ever experience a situation where either in a tag or a singles that somebody was unnecessarily rough and stiff, and what were your thoughts of those individuals that had a reputation anyway for doing that a lot?
You know, a couple of times I can say who it was. I was working with, I think it was an 89 or 80. Whenever Dennis Condrey and Randy Rose came into WCW and they feuded briefly with, I think it was Bobby Eaton and Stanley, like the original Midnight Express with the Midnight, whatever it was. And Dennis Condrey was a jerk. He was really stiff with everything. He wouldn't say much to you. And, Randy Rose, who I'd known before that here in Florida, he was always super nice and easy. But other than that, I mean, and then there was a guy named the Angel of Death, or Dave Sheldon, his name was. I think he was the Angel of Death in Texas, but in WCW worked as one of the Russian assassins with Jack Victory, I think. I don't know, so long ago. But he tried to stretch me, put me in some kind of move in a match where he like had my head under and he twisted my arm, and I was like, oh, I hurting, I had to like actually fight to get away from him. And when in that situation, you're just thinking, who the hell trained this guy? What is what? And he was a big guy. What are you going to do anyway? You just had to suffer. And after the match, I don't even remember those guys saying anything to you either. The Steiners, like, go back to the Steiners, like, especially Rick Steiner, he would always thank me right in the match. You could even see him sometimes. I'd be laying on the ground after he beat me, and he'd just lean down and go, "Thank you, Bobby," just like that, right on the TV. So,
You in 1990,
but not too many times. I say.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying that only happened a couple of times as far as people being like extra stiff or whatever. So I got really lucky. Most people always, I don't know if it was respect or whatever, but they were professional with me and treated me well. And again, I hear a lot of guys talk about, oh, when I was here and I was there, we had to dress in the jobber's dressing. I never experienced that. At center stage, you had 3 dressing rooms. I always dressed in the middle dressing room. I don't know why, but I did. But Terry Funk dressed with us. Big Boss Man dressed with us. All these different stars dressed. It wasn't no pecking order, at least in my experience. Everybody has their own experience, their own mindset. Maybe they thought there was a pecking order. I always dressed with people I travel with. They're your friends. And they were the other guys that did what I did. But all 4 of us or 5 of us that traveled together could have walked in any of those 3 dressing rooms. And if there was a seat, we could have sat down and dressed. Same with WWF. A lot of guys I've seen on these shows say that I had to dress here. I had to dress. Every time I went to WWF, I dressed with Paul Bear and Jerry Lawler because they were hilarious. And, I always looked with Lawler and Paul Bear with. That's where I went because I'd sit in the corner off to the side. There was never get out, go there, go. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Again, my experience. I don't know.
Yeah, like we've definitely heard that before. In 90, you worked on TV in WCW in a handicap against Mark Callis, who went on to become, of course, the Undertaker. Did you have any idea at that juncture that he was going to be one of the all-time greats?
Oh no, of course not. I mean, he was good. He was always a nice guy. I was with Pat Rose, my friend Pat Rose, who was actually wearing the kind of boots that Terry Funk gave me. But on that particular match, I wasn't wearing mine. He was wearing his. But yeah, I mean, that was an easy match. It was simple. I mean, I just had to come in, a couple of forearms. He punched me, kicked me, threw me out, whatever. Hard punch threw me out. But he was cool. But again, I didn't think of him as, he's going to go on to be, because who knew? But he went on to be one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, what I think the greatest characters of all time, without a doubt. Mm-hmm. And people like to say who the greatest big man one. You want to go, I mean, he's a big guy. He's definitely one of the greatest big guys. And I know a lot of people like to associate the greatest big guy with the fat guy. Like, oh, Vader's the greatest big guy. No, he wasn't, folks. Yeah, Vader could do a moonsault, but he'd hurt the guy. If you could do all these fantastic moves as a big, fat, overbearing, obnoxious, pig-faced bastard like Vader was, that's fantastic. But if you hurt the guys, the fantastic part is no longer part of the equation, just to give you people a lesson. Bam Bam Bigelow, on the other hand, could do all those things. And guess what he would do? Nothing. He wouldn't hurt you at all. When I wrestled Bam Bam Bigelow in the WWF, I'm laying on the ground as my big fat loser self, and I'm looking up, and there's this 350-pound guy on the top rope going to come crashing down on me, and all I thought was, oh God, and he did it. I sold it. He pinned me, and you know what I felt? Nothing, because he was great.
Did you ever wrestle?
Every week. Vader hurt guys every week.
Did you ever wrestle Yokozuna, who had that reputation as well?
No, but he was a nice guy. He was very cool. No, I never worked with him, but he was a nice guy.
An interesting factoid for WCW was in '92. You had that match against Joey Maggs called the Battle of the Underdogs. Was that something that was supposed to be more than it was? Because all I could find was like a one-off on that, unless I missed something.
I don't even remember how all that came. I think that was a Bill Watts thing or a Dusty thing. But I do remember, if you want to hear a slightly funny story, and I feel bad about that match because Joey was a great guy and he was a great worker. And I heard him in the very first couple of moves we did. And I always felt bad about that because the match, it was okay, but it could have been so much better if I wouldn't have heard him. It was just a mistake. And, but earlier in the day, we were all sitting around the ring in center stage, and Dusty's in the ring or outside the ring, but we're all sitting around and he's talking to us and he goes, oh, we're going to shake things up tonight. Even Bobby Cook's going to get a win. And I stood up and I said, but Dusty, I don't want to win. He said, sit down and shut up, Bobby. You're going to win. And everybody got a laugh, hey, Bob don't want to win. But, and then years later, like probably 3 years ago, I saw Terry Taylor for the first time in years because he worked for NXT. And I went to a show with some friends. And I went up to him. I said, Terry, you probably don't remember me on Bob. He goes, of course I remember you. You're the only guy I've ever met that didn't want to win, because he was there that day. But I felt really bad about that because I heard, I used to do a thing where I'd lock up with a guy and I'd do that headlock, hammerlock, drop toe hold, front face, go to the head really fast. And I would do that without telling anybody. Because, in wrestling, when you're trained properly, you're trained to go with things. That could be another story if you wanted to hear it, but you're trained to go with things. You lock up with a guy, and if the guy doesn't automatically do something, because not everything is planned out like it is nowadays. Back in those days, you'd talk about the finish, maybe a couple little things. Most of it was called in the ring. But when I did that, I would lock up, and if the guy doesn't do something, I do it. Drop toe hold, and you just go with it. But I did it really quick on Joey, and I went for the drop toe hold, and he wasn't ready for it, and he tweaked his knee, and you can see him mess with it right afterward. I felt so bad because it hampered his ability to keep the match, doing more in the match than
Another social media question was you worked the Junkyard Dog in 1990 in a tag match, I guess, and we've heard a lot about his limitations at that time. What was your experience working with him at that particular period? Given all we've heard about how poor he was able to perform in the ring at that time. Sorry, you're on mute. Let's see. Your mic is not connected. There you go. There you go.
It automatically disconnected. I guess they didn't want to hear me talk no more. I don't blame him. But Junkyard Dog was easy to me, but we didn't do a lot. He'd do a headbutts and he'd throw some punches. He had a great punch too, by the way, when he was on. And he'd do those things where you get on his hands and knees and do the headbutt into you. And I think of me and Chuck Coates, we always like to joke about it, but me and him almost beat Tommy Rich in the Junkyard Dog. We almost beat him, but the bookers didn't want us to, so we let him win. But JYD was a cool guy. I have nothing bad to say about him. I never saw him messed up. He was always there in the brain, probably more than I could say for Kerry Von Erich when I met him and wrestled him.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that question, but to skip ahead to that, what was that like working Kerry at that stage.
Working him was great. It happened at the Manatee Civic Center back in, I don't remember, 90, 91 in Bradenton, Florida, where we used to tape Suncoast Pro Wrestling. When I was the Masked Superstar, we didn't get into that, but I was a champion there in the top heel. I feuded with Gene Malenko, the great Dean Malenko. But anyways, I met Kerry that day 3 times, but every time I met him, it was like meeting him the first time. I was like, oh, I'm Kerry Von Erich. I was like, yeah, Kerry, I met you, like an hour ago. Oh, yeah. Then he'd walk an hour later, he'd see, hey, I'm Kerry Von Erich. Yeah. I'm kind of hoping he was ribbing me, but I don't think he was. But when he got in the ring and the bell rang, man, he was easy as could be, light as a feather with everything he did. The discus punch, he called everything in the match from the, whip me in the ropes, say, duck the clothesline, duck the clothesline, slant, whatever he told me. He was great. I got nothing bad to say about him. He's just a little, but he was playing with his radio-controlled car all day, so maybe he was just concerned with that. I don't know.
Might be. Hannibal from the Hannibal TV says, hello, Bob. Love the shirt.
Oh, so do I. I love Terry Funk. I got a whole bunch like behind me here. You can't see them, but a whole bunch of Terry Funk shirts.
That's awesome. In 95, you started doing work with the WWF. How did this all come about?
Remember Jimmy Backlund or Jimmy Del Rey, who was part of the Heavenly Bodies with Dr. Tom Pritchard, and I think were they managed by Jim Cornette and Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Well, they got a job in WWF, and I know Jimmy since I started for years here in Florida on Indies, and he wrestled championship wrestling from Florida. And he just called me. And he said, Bob, you want to do TV for WWF? And I was like, no, what are you, crazy? No, I said, sure, I want to, And that was, you made more money with WWF too. You made more money. You got flown everywhere, whereas WCW, we had to drive, which I didn't mind because I hate to fly. WCW paid for our hotels, our rent-a-cars, our gas. I didn't mind that part. But that's how I got in. I went crazy again, didn't I? But Jimmy Del Rey, simple phone call. Hey, you want to wrestle? Oh, sure. And that was it.
Did you happen to have any recollections of or encounters with the chairman of the board, Vince McMahon?
Not much. I mean, he said hi to me and stuff a couple of times when he walked by. I think one time he even thanked me for coming. He's like, I appreciate you coming. He was really nice too. And he would interact with people. He would never act like a jerk. And another thing I could go into, but I'll just do it briefly. When I was there, guess who was nicer than the other guy that people think wasn't nice as opposed to what they think the other guy was? I'll tell you, Shawn Michaels was cool as crap to me. You know who wasn't? Bret Hart. Bret Hart used to walk around like he was miserable. Shawn Michaels would walk around happy-go-lucky. Hey, Cooker, what you doing? Hey. But Bret would just walk around like he's miserable. And we'd all go out and party after the show. Bret would sit in the corner by himself at the bar, moping and stuff. Everybody else would be having fun. But that was just my experience. Again, I'm not cutting Bret down. I'm just telling people who always like to think that Shawn Michaels was his asshole. And maybe he was to certain people. I'm saying to myself and the people I saw him interact with when I was there, that I wasn't there long, maybe 6 months, a year, I don't know. But he was cool to me. But I would have loved to work with Shawn and Bret Hart, but I didn't get to.
Do you think Bret's demeanor was he was feeling the pressure of the spot that he had at the time, or?
What spot did he have? He wasn't even a champion when I was there. He was, I think, wasn't Diesel the champion when I was there?
He was upper mid card. I think he might have had a run already with the belt though, if you were there in 95-ish.
Yeah, I just don't remember. I remember when I first got there though, Kevin Nash called me out of the dressing room because I knew most of the guys before that, like Luger was there, and they were all in WCW for years, and I knew Lex from Florida when he first started, but Kevin Nash called me out of the locker room in the hallway. He wouldn't even remember this, but he introduced me to it was either Chief J Strongbro and Tony Garea, or Tony Garea and Pat Patterson. One of those, but it was Tony Garea. But he said, "This is Bob Cook. He was with me in WCW. He's a hell of a hand. He can work with anybody." Blah 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 blah. He didn't have to do that, but he did.
Mm-hmm.
And no one in WWF ever heard me. I got to work with Adam Baum, Brian Clark, awesome guy. We still friends today. Bam Bam Bigelow, Duke the Dunkster Drosy, what else name? Drosy? Doink the Clown. I won't talk about that one, but I was treated great.
That was the Matt Bourne version of Doink the Clown.
Yeah, it was it was the what was his name? Ray Apollo.
Oh. Ray Apollo. Yeah.
Yeah. Matt Bourne.
Not a good match. I take it. Yeah,
it was just a clown show.
Mm-hmm.
Remember they had that little guy Dink? He's running around. He's sticking his butt in my face. You just had to. It's bad enough I'm a loser. You got to make me look like a complete loser. But he was easy. It wasn't that. He even made it in the magazine with him doing the thing off the top rope. I mean, one of the trading cards. So. It wasn't all bad.
The whoopee cushion.
Bob Cook was on Monday Night Raw against Doink the Clown.
You mentioned some of the talent that you worked against there. You know, some of the names left out. Of course, 1, 2, 3 Kid, Hakushi, Bob Holly, Bulldog, et cetera, et cetera. Out of all those TV shots, do you have any memories that stick out as either positive or negative?
They were all positive. I can't think of any negative ones though. Really, I mean, I wrestled. I can't think of Luger and Bulldog. I know, and the Smoking Guns. I've known them. Especially Billy Gunn. I knew him when he first started. He wrestled as Kip Montana here in Florida in 1988 with Jerry Gray on some of his shows. I worked with him very early on. Who else? Man Mountain Rock. He was. What was he called at WCW? I don't remember. Max Payne.
Max Payne.
Great guy. Another great guy. Yeah. I never had a bad experience in WWF or WCW. Necessarily bad experience. You know, a couple of people in the ring, but for the most part, I have nothing bad to say about wrestling. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that. Hey, Bob, tell us how big of a jerk this guy was. I never liked Jim Crockett, that bug-eyed, mongoloid-looking freak who bought Florida wrestling and put it under. But, you know, can't win them all. His check's always cleared.
That's fabulous. You, according to my research, you had a period right after that that you were inactive for quite a number of years. Why did that? Why did you segue out of the industry for a while there?
I got sick of getting hurt all the time and being in pain, even though I'm in pain now. But back then it was just like I'd got a job working for a local airport limo company. And it was just so easy, you know. I spent all the time sitting on my butt, which I did with wrestling too. Most of the time, you're in a car sitting on your butt. But at least with the airport limo, I wasn't taking bumps. You know, I just go to the airport. I'd talk to people. A lot of people wanted to. I'd always bring up either Evel Knievel or wrestling because they're two subjects that I knew a lot about. So I'd bring those up, and then people would be interested. Oh, you used to be a wrestler. Then you just start telling stories, and you know, it was an easy job. It was decent money, and I did it for like 14, 15 years. I still got the car that the company, the people gave me the car, one of their Lincoln Town cars sitting in my driveway that they gave me 10 years ago when they shut the company down. Like, Bob, you want this car? Yeah, sure.
Nice. Another social media question that we get quite a bit from individuals that were in the business during those wild 80s and 90s years was, do you have any favorite road stories and or rat stories?
Nah, not really. I mean, road stories, they were fun. I was never like a person that chased the rats. I was married the whole time. And regardless of what my wife might think, I didn't chase the women. I enjoyed hanging out. I never had a drink until I was like 28 years old. And then Oxycontin is the reason I started drinking. I had drank like 3 years on a row, but I never chased the women. You know, I hung out with my friends and I had fun with them. And that was it. I don't know. Call me a good boy, but
any particularly memorable road trip stories?
Well, there was a lot. There was this bar in Atlanta that they called the Dungeon. I don't think that was the real name of it. Maybe it was, where we all stayed at the Ramada Inn. A lot of crazy stuff went on there. Harley Race and Butch Reed got in a shoot fight there. A shoot wrestling match. It wasn't a fight. They weren't mad, but they moved all the tables over and they're wrestling on the floor for real. I mean, Butch ended up getting concussion. You know, they ended up going in the elevator laughing all the way. You know, like afterwards, they weren't mad. They just somehow decided that, hey, let's wrestle, you know. But all kinds of crazy stuff went on there like that. But, you know, it was a lot of fun. got thrown out of restaurants a few times. Brian Pillman and I threw a guy in a dumpster once coming out of a bar at like 7 a.m. There was a bar in Atlanta called Club Anytime. And because you could go there anytime, hey, play on words. Guess that's what it was. But we're coming out of the bar, and of course we were drinking, and some guy accused us of leaving beer bottles laying around. And Brian's like, they're not ours. And he goes, oh, you got to clean them up. And that was all Brian needed. So we took we threw them in the dumpster. The good old days. Wish they had like cell phone footage of all that stuff back then, because he'd probably be in jail, but
Yeah, that's what a lot of guys say. Thank God there weren't cell phones at that point in time. Do you feel that the current, for the most part, the current companies, the big companies, and their lack of the use of enhancement talent, do you think that hurts the end product, and do you think that there could be a use for the way in which enhancement talent was utilized in the past to build acts, get acts over? Do you think that we could go back and take that approach again, or is it just part and parcel of a bygone era?
it's definitely a bygone era. If you can't get people to watch the shows, like the ratings aren't exactly skyrocketing now. I mean, especially AEW, they have good weeks and bad weeks, mostly bad weeks compared to their original great weeks. WWF had their lowest rating of all time with Raw. If you can't get people to watch the Stars versus the Stars as it's being presented today, you're not going to get people to tune in and go, hey, Roman Reigns is wrestling some guy we don't even know next Friday. Let's tune in. That's not going to happen. I mean, they kind of built that Ellsworth kid, or was it Braun Strowman originally? Wasn't that how they built him, throwing against a bunch of the lower guys? And they actually made Ellsworth a little bit of a star. But I don't think it would work. It just wouldn't work. Like, if you go back and watch the old TBS shows, it was like 90% stars against the losers, and they'd throw in like a match with Ric Flair and Ronnie Garvin at the end, and they'd have a great match, but they were always in like, tune in next week. We don't know what's going to happen. But I just don't think it would work, because, again, if you can't get people to watch the shows when they're basically giving you almost pay-per-views every week, you're not going to get people to tune in to watch them wrestle guys like Bob Cook. Well, they might watch Bob Cook because, everybody likes to watch people get humiliated. I actually wrestled a couple months ago. That's how stupid I am.
How did that go?
Oh, it was horrible. I was gasping for air. It was like death. The anxiety was horrible the whole time up until I went out there. And then I was in the ring for like 25 minutes because it was a battle royal. And you even have to do things in battle royals. And I was gasping for air, trying to throw a punch, trying to sell this, trying to sell that, trying to throw another punch. Pretending to choke somebody, like, stay down, I'm blown up. It was fun because I got to see a lot of old friends I hadn't seen in years, which to me is the best part of doing that kind of stuff. Brian Blair puts together a thing every 3 months in Tampa we call the Legends Lunch. He's been doing it for over 20 years. It originated with Gordon Soley, or with Brian, Jerry Briscoe, Mike Graham. They all started it when Gordon Soley and Hiro Matsuda got cancer. They started it as a way to get their mind off their situation, and everybody would get together and just tell stories and hang out. But they've been doing it for over 20 years now. And I'm one of the guys that helps Brian put it together, but we have them about every 3 months. And that's what I enjoy doing, because you get to see all your old friends. I mean, Steve Kearns is always coming, and Danny Spivey and Jerry Briscoe and Bugsy McGraw, and of course Brian, a lot of the local guys, a lot of the lesser known local guys, and a lot of friends of mine. I actually have friends. I may be a jobber, but I got a few friends who love me, and I love them. A few. Well, they probably lie a lot too.
You obviously have a lot of friends, given your social media presence and following there. You probably have a thought on this, that enhancement talent is long overdue from being included in the Hall of Fame, given how pivotal they were in that bygone era to the success of the business. Is that something that you think is valid, and do you think we'll ever see the greats from that period of time get their due, as many, myself included, believe they should?
You probably won't. I think they should too. And I'm not saying that thinking because I would get it, because I probably wouldn't. And would I deserve it? Probably not. But it certainly would be awesome, right? but I wouldn't call it the Enhancement Talent Award or something. Like, we got the enhancement wing. I'd call it the Star Makers. I've always said that, call it the Star Makers, because back in those days, you were, in a sense, the Star Makers, because as I was far from the greatest wrestler, but there were many times when I got in the ring with guys that I had to put over that I made look really good, who were nowhere near as good as I was, you know. And I'm not bragging. I'm just saying that's the way it was in those days. But you call it the Star Makers Award, you come up with something else, but don't call it the Jobber Award. I hate that. I also hate enhancement talent. You know what I like? I like the term pro wrestler, because guess what? That's what I was. I wore pro wrestling boots until Terry Funk gave me those cool boots. But I wore wrestling trunks made by K&H Wrestling Wear. I was a pro wrestler. I was trained by the greatest trainer, pro wrestler, bad guy, the great Malenko, which we haven't talked about, but I was trained by the great Malenko. I even trained with the great Karl Gotch as a pro wrestler, you know. It's just we weren't on the same level. Not everybody, you know, a lot of people don't realize there are many spots in wrestling. They all need to be filled. Everybody has a spot. Everybody has a place. Everybody has a need for that spot to be filled. Not everybody can be a star. And in the grand scheme of things, I'll give you a reality check, fans. In the grand scheme of things, very few people become stars. Even fewer become superstars, and fewer than that become legends, and even fewer than that become icons. You can think of, you could really count on probably 10 fingers that, like, icons: Gorgeous George, Bruno, Hulk, Austin. Who else? I mean, you know, when you really think legends, there's a lot of legends, but very few people really become superstars. When you think of all the cards that are, you know, all the people that are on each card, how many people on that card are really bringing in the fans? You know, not very many. They might not want to admit it, but the first few matches, people are just there because you're there, and you have to be there, and that's important. I'm not saying it's not important, but again, I'm rambling again, but pro wrestler is the actual term. It's not jobber. It's not enhancement talent. It's not carpenter. I didn't build houses. It's pro wrestlers. I traveled the roads like a pro wrestler, right? I showed up on time. I dressed out. I wrestled in a match where the referee pinned my shoulders more often than not. But it was a pro wrestling match. I was a pro wrestler. But that's what I say. Barry Horowitz will tell you that too. You don't like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Had the pleasure of interviewing Barry a couple of times. But Bob, you've been extremely generous with your time tonight. Really appreciate it. But where can the fans keep up with you on social media? And do you have anything to plug that the fans should be aware of that's going on in your world at the moment?
Not really. I say a lot of stupid things on Facebook. We got our Legends coming up. Legends lunch coming up in October, but the fans aren't allowed to be there. So that's kind of a moot point. Is that the correct terminology? We don't allow fans there. We have allowed fans to come who have become friends over the years. You know, they're friends now, but we don't allow fans to come. It's a lunch for the boys. If you're into business, you're invited. And special guests and, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, I don't do a whole lot.
So your Facebook is and that's at Bob Cook is the best place to keep up.
That's where I do most. I mean, I got Instagram, but I just like looking at the hot chicks on Instagram. And I follow Britney Spears. She's kind of crazy, but in a good way. But yeah, and you know, the X once in a while I post stuff, but I post stuff for the Cali for Alley Club too on Facebook, Instagram, and X when I think about things. Like where we just posted something about Joyce Grable. We all wish Joyce Grable all the best. She's going through a really tough time. I believe a hospice has been set in. So we all say, God bless the Grace. She's a great lady, a legend in the business, and we wish her well. As Brian Blair would say, Godspeed, Miss Grable.
Well,
Bob, we didn't even talk about Evel Knievel, my favorite subject. What kind of show is this? Who booked this?
I was just going to say I booked it. I'm the booker for Great North Wrestling, of course. I was just going to say that we'd love to have you back again, and I'll definitely keep in touch to keep on top of all the happenings. But really appreciate your time once again. Thanks for being on the Great North Wrestling podcast, sir.
I didn't even talk about Chris Nelson. What's going on?
There'll definitely be a part 2.
All right. Thanks for having me on.
Well, fans, that's it for a very entertaining edition of the Great North Wrestling podcast. Stay tuned to thehannibaltv.com. And if you haven't already, why haven't you? hit that subscribe button to stay up to date as to all the programming that we have coming at you. Until then, have a great, tremendous evening, and goodbye on behalf of myself and the cooker.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match